Hey guys, it's Morgan here to walk through the free practice test on the science section of the TEAS exam with you. We're going to go through one question at a time in the correct order. We'll review all of the correct answers. We won't go into all the answer explanations for the wrong answers. That's on the website, and you can look at that really closely and take some notes there if you need to. But what we're going to do together today is just run through the correct answers. So let's get rolling. Question 1 asks, which of the following correctly describes the law of segregation? So as far as test-taking strategies, there are a couple things that I'm going to run through with some of these questions. I think it will be valuable for you to sort of take note of them and try and incorporate them into your own practice as you go through with, test-taking strategies for your exam. So what this question is asking us is to correctly describe, and we're looking specifically for the law of segregation, okay? So from my studying, I know this is one of the things that you're just going to have to commit to memory. This is not something necessarily that test-taking strategies are going to help with, but there are a couple things we can look for, right? So it's asking us to describe a law of segregation, right? Segregating means separating. And one of the answer choices here doesn't really discuss separating anything. That is the second answer choice here, which says that it states that all genetic factors are present in the DNA, right? So this answer choice here, we can probably go ahead and eliminate even without knowing anything about the law of segregation itself. So even if you haven't studied at all, you haven't done any review, you can go ahead and eliminate that second answer choice. Because you will have studied and you will have used Nurse Hub's amazing resources, you will know that the law of segregation states that each pair of alleles segregate randomly during gametogenesis, or gamete formation. This means that each gamete or sex cell receives one copy of a gene called an allele, and they later reunite or combine randomly during fertilization. This way, the offspring acquires one allele from each parent, okay? And so that gives us answer choice 1. The remaining answer choices are actually different laws. One is the law of independent assortment, one is the law of dominance. And so that's just something that you'll learn as you move through. So the answer here should be the first one. Okay, there we go. All right, moving on to question 2. This one is a Punnett square. The genotypes of the parents in the Punnett square below can be described as, right? So you're looking at the parents. We know that the parents are always listed on the outside of the Punnett square, so that's the first thing you need to know. Everything that's inside of the Punnett square are actually the potential offspring. So these are our parents. We know that the genotypes of the parents in the Punnett square below can be described as. So we're looking for genotype information, which immediately signals in my mind that we're looking for words like heterozygous or homozygous, right? So this parent right here, the red parent, we know is homozygous because both are the same and they're both capitalized. Each letter is capitalized. So we know that that is a signifier that they are dominant. So we have homozygous dominant. I can go ahead and eliminate any answer choices that do not have a homozygous dominant parent. So that means I can eliminate this one. Heterozygous recessive, heterozygous dominant. Also can eliminate that one. Homozygous dominant, so we know I have to keep that one. And here we have heterozygous dominant and homozygous dominant. So again, I have to keep both of these. Now, regarding the blue parent, I know that these two are different, right? This is a capital letter, this is a lowercase letter. So I know this is hetero. And I know that because there is a capital letter, that capital letter means dominant. The dominant is going to supersede the lowercase recessive. So what we know is we have a hetero dominant parent in the blue. So I'm looking for homozygous dominant, which I already saw, and homozygous and heterozygous dominant. Okay, so I see here heterozygous dominant. And just to double check, I do have the homozygous dominant in the second answer choice, but the next one is homozygous recessive. Homozygous recessive would look like this, and this is not what this parent is up here. So again, we're going to go with our correct answer, which is answer choice A in this situation. Now let's see if I can select the answer choice. Just delete this. There we go. See if I can submit. All right. That's our correct answer. Let's go ahead and move on to question number 3. Question number 3 asks, which of these is a function of a ribosome? 1. Ribosomes can transfer mRNA from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. Ribosomes carry the codons required for protein synthesis. Ribosomes move along the length of the amino acid chain and introduce peptide bonds in between them. Or is it the last one? Ribosomes can decode mRNA and assemble amino acids for protein synthesis. Again, this is one of these questions. There will be several that I point out to you throughout this practice exam where you're just going to have to know. This is a fairly basic question that's just asking you about function. This is something you can easily put on flashcards for all the different organelles that are inside of cells. So what you would learn when you review all of the lessons here on Nurse Hub about the cell and our tour of the cell lessons is that the ribosomes, they decode the mRNA that travel to the ribosome from the nucleus of the cell, and they assemble amino acids for protein synthesis. That gives us answer choice D. So we know we can go ahead and select. Let's move on to question number 4. Question number 4 asks us, the number of protons is the same as blank, right? So here we have another one that will just need to be committed to memory. What you will learn when you review our chemistry lessons is that protons are the same as the atomic number. They give the atom its identity. They tell us whether this atom is carbon or hydrogen, nitrogen or phosphorus. And so the answer here is pretty straightforward. It's going to be answer choice 2. The number of protons is the same as the atomic number, which tells us also the identity of the atom. All right, let's move on to question number 5. Which of the following statement is true about protons? Some atoms have no protons. The number of protons in the nucleus is the defining property of an element. They have more mass than a neutron, or they have a negative charge. The answer is that the number of protons in the nucleus is the defining property of an element. The key to remember here is you're looking for what is true about protons. Some questions will ask you to identify things that are not true, identify all of the true things, identify all of the wrong things. So you'll want to pay attention to the language in the actual question so that you know that you're answering kind of the call of the question each time. We can go ahead and progress to question number 6. All right, folks, let's have a look at question number 6. So it says a lipid or fat molecule can be broken down into fatty acids and blank. The correct answer here, this is just something you're going to need to have made flashcards for and really committed all the different macromolecules to memory and understand kind of their component parts. So the correct answer here is glycerol. Glycerol and fatty acids are the monomers of lipid or fat molecules. So we go over that, kind of what are the building blocks for all of the different macromolecules. Moving on. Number 8 is asking us, which of these bonds would we see between nitrogenous bases? There are a few questions like this on the test that I think kind of straddle the line between chemistry and bio. I think if you have a good understanding about the different types of bonds that exist, you can make a very educated guess on this question. If you study the bio course really carefully, you will know the answer for sure. So nitrogenous bases, we're talking about adenine, guanine, cytosine, uracil. We're talking about the nitrogenous bases that exist within strands of DNA and RNA. What you'll learn in the biology course is that those bases are held together by hydrogen bonds because those bonds are easy to break. They're a weak, attractive bond, and so in the presence of any kind of like slightly negative or slightly positive charge, they will break apart really easily. And that's necessary during the processes of replication and transcription. So the correct answer here is hydrogen bonds. And we can move on to our next question. All right, question number 9 asks, which of the following is the most accurate description of the link between chromosomes and DNA? Starting from the bottom, it says genes contain chromosomes that are made up of DNA. The DNA sequence is made up of chromosomes, which include numerous genes. Chromosomes include numerous genes, each of which is made up of a DNA sequence. Chromosomes are the building blocks of DNA. So this question is kind of a foundational question about kind of the hierarchy of the kind of different components or things that make up our genetic material. So what you will learn in our biology course is that chromosomes carry genetic information in the form of DNA. So the chromosome is the largest component. DNA is wound up to form the chromosome. Each gene is formed of different sequences of DNA and carries information and characteristics of the organisms. So the correct answer here is chromosomes include numerous genes, each gene is made up of a DNA sequence. This is the correct answer, and we can move on to question number 10. Question number 10 asks, which of the following statements about diffusion is true? So here's another one of those examples I was telling you about. It's asking you which of the following statements is true. So, and then it also asks you, here's another clue. Please select all that apply. So there's more than one correct answer here. You're going to be selecting several. So let's start at the top. Diffusion is a passive process. Diffusion is the net movement of molecules or atoms from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. Diffusion is an active process. So we can see active and passive are antonyms for one another. So one of these will be correct and one of them will be wrong. Diffusion is the net movement of molecules or atoms from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration. So again, we see that this answer choice contrasts with the second answer choice. This one, the second answer choice asks or says that atoms are moving from an area of high concentration to one of low concentration. The fourth answer choice says it's moving from low to high. So again, these two are opposites. One of them will likely be true and the other one will not. Gas exchange in tissues is an example of diffusion, and the last option is osmosis is an example of diffusion. Okay, so what you will learn in our course is a number of things about diffusion. All of them are aligned to the TEAS exam. And so the first is that, yes, start at the bottom. Osmosis is indeed an example of diffusion. Gas exchange in tissues is an example of diffusion. This is also correct. Diffusion, okay, is the net movement of molecules or atoms from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. So this answer choice is not correct. Instead, this one is the correct answer. Diffusion is a passive process. It happens without any need to act on it, any force exerted on it. It happens naturally. So again, diffusion is an active process. We can eliminate that one as a correct answer. All right, question 11 here is on hormones. So this question asks us, which of the following is not increased in response to dehydration? So the key word here, and you'll notice this on several questions, it is the word not. So you're looking at something that is not increased, or you could just say what is decreased in response to dehydration. During dehydration, the amount of antidiuretic hormone renin and aldosterone are increased in order to prevent further water loss in the urine. So all of these are not correct because they're true, right? So that's aldosterone and renin and antidiuretic hormone. Erythropoietin is produced in the kidney in response to low levels of oxygen or hypoxia in order to stimulate production of red blood cells. So this hormone is not connected to a response to dehydration. Therefore, it is incorrect, which means it is our correct answer. I know that's a little confusing, but it is our correct answer here. All right, let's move on to question number 12. In which segment of the nephron is glucose resorbed? This is something that you're just going to have to commit to memory. This is one of the anatomy and physiology questions. The collecting duct, distal convoluted tubule, and the loop of Henle all play a role in resorbing excess water in the kidneys, which concentrates our urine. So these answers are all incorrect. So those are our answers. It's the distal convoluted tube, the collecting duct, and the loop of Henle. All are incorrect. Our correct answer is instead the proximal convoluted tube. And we can delete our edits here to the page. Question number 13 asks, what is the correct sequence in which inhaled air passes through the respiratory tract? So on our website, we have this really cool feature where you can drag and drop these various different parts and move them around. So you'll want to use your mouse, your cursor, to move these different parts to the order in which they should go. So you start from top to bottom. This is an anatomy question where you're just going to need to memorize the order of a process. This question is asking us to correctly order the structures based on the sequence of how air is inhaled and moves through the respiratory tract into the lungs. The best way to study this is to make flashcards that you can practice placing in the correct order and practice labeling a diagram just like you will do now. So when inhaling, air is taken through the mouth and nose, right? So that's our nasal cavity. Then through the larynx and pharynx. These passageways warm the air and prepare it for gas exchange. The air continues on through the trachea, commonly referred to as the windpipe. The trachea then splits into a left and right bronchi, with each side dividing further into smaller bronchioles. While some bronchioles may directly be involved in gas exchange, the majority of them are part of conducting airway, which simply moves air through the respiratory system to get them to the alveoli, where most of the gas exchange occurs. So the correct order here will be first nasal cavity, then pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. Okay, so this is the correct order, and we can press next, move on to the next question. Question number 14 is a scientific process question. It's asking us which of the following is a hypothesis. So you will go over this in our scientific reasoning course, where we kind of go over the larger, broader concepts within science and scientific experimentation. What you will learn is that a hypothesis is often an if-then statement, or the words if-then can be placed in the statement and it will make sense. So the first option is 5 different breeds of dog are at the park. The next is if a student gets more sleep, they will get a higher test score. Next, when I added fertilizer to my plants, they grew more quickly. And finally, 1 liter of water was added to a reaction. The answer here fits into that if-then statement and in fact already has an if. So you'll notice here that there is an if a student gets more sleep, and you could kind of mentally insert the then. Then they will get a higher test score. The third answer choice, when I added fertilizer to my plants, they grew more quickly. That is an observation. I think that's the closest next best answer, but it doesn't fit the if-then statement. This, if we added it here, it would say, if when I added fertilizer to my plants, they grew more quickly. It's not making a statement that when I add fertilizer to my plants, the fertilizer causes them to grow more quickly. Instead, answer choice 2 or B here says, if a student gets more sleep, then they will get a higher test score. It's creating a cause and effect relationship between the first clause and that second clause. This is our correct answer. Let's move on to question number 15. Question 15 asks, which of the following descriptions is correct? This runs through just the states of matter. This is something, again, that will just have to be committed to memory. We do go over it in our chemistry course in great detail. So we're looking for what is correct. You're looking for what's true here. There's going to be one correct answer. There's no indication that there are going to be multiple correct answers. So the first option is gas, no definite volume, no definite shape. Well, that one sounds pretty good. I'm going to leave that available. That sounds like the correct answer. Liquid, no definite volume, and a constant shape. Even common sense tells you that this isn't true. Liquid takes the shape of the container in which it is placed. It doesn't have a fixed or constant shape. So this answer is incorrect. The next is solid, no constant volume, no constant shape. We know both of these statements are wrong. A solid, think of any object in your home, the computer that you're viewing this lesson on, or the phone that you're holding in your hand. Those are solid. They have both a constant volume and a constant shape. This answer is also incorrect. The last option is gas, constant volume and a definite shape. Just thinking about gases in general, you know that they diffuse when, for example, you are cooking on the stove and you might burn something, right? And the fumes from that disperse over time, right? They don't stay in a particular place and hold a specified shape. They also do not maintain their volume, right? Again, they disperse, they kind of intermingle with the rest of the air, and eventually that scent goes away. This answer is also incorrect, leaving us with only one correct option, and that is the correct answer for our purposes for this test. Let's go ahead and select it. We move on. Question 16. Using the provided image, choose the anatomical structure designated by letter B. All right, so what you're going to need to do for a question like this is go ahead and identify what part the question is asking you to look for. So that's letter B. We know we have located letter B, it's right here. The question is asking us, choose the anatomical structure designated by the letter B. Is it the right ventricle, the left atrium, the right atrium, or the left ventricle? This is something where you're just going to have to sort of print out a bunch of these for yourself, label the heart parts over and over and over again, commit them to memory. Letter choice B is designated, that is the left atrium. The right ventricle is actually labeled C, the right atrium is labeled A, and the left ventricle is labeled D. That's something, again, you're just going to have to commit that to memory and kind of move forward with studying for kind of the parts of the heart in that way. All right, question 17 asks us to balance a chemical equation. Let's go ahead and have a look at this one together. We go through the entire process of how to balance equations, what you need to do in order to do that successfully. The first thing you'll want to do is add up the number of each type of atom. So we see here we have carbons, we have hydrogens, we have chlorine. Okay, so let's go ahead and add up the carbons on the left side, or the reactant side of the equation. So we see there's 1 right here. This is our 1 carbon. 1. Move on to our hydrogens. There are 4 hydrogens. That's what that little subscript is telling us. So we'll put a 4 here. And the last one that we have is chlorine. And we see there are 2 chlorines. That's what that little number means. Then on the product side, we also have carbon. We also have hydrogen. And of course, we have chlorine as well. Let's add them up. On the product side, we have 1 carbon here. We have 1 hydrogen over here. And we have 4 chlorines here plus 1 chlorine over here. That's 5 chlorines total. All right, so we now have to figure out how to balance what's on the reactant side, which is over here, with what's on the product side. Our carbons are already balanced, so you might be tempted to sort of leave that as is. The next is our hydrogens. We can see that our hydrogens on the reactant side have 4, on the product side have 1. We can easily add a coefficient of 4 here before the hydrogen. Now, with that, we have 4 hydrogens on the right side, and there are still 4 here on the left. We feel good about that, and we can move on to our chlorines. Our chlorines now, with the addition of this green coefficient here in front of the hydrogen, it doesn't only apply to the hydrogen, it also applies to all the different atoms in this particular compound. So this 4 that we wrote right here will also apply to the chlorine. That creates 4 of these chlorines on this side. So now we have these 4 chlorines plus these 4. This number is no longer 5, but it is now 8. The question is, how do we get this chlorine on the reactant side up to 8? Well, we can easily add a coefficient here of 4. It only impacts the chlorines. And so now let's do one final count to make sure we're in good standing. We have 1 carbon on the reactant side. Let's sort of do our final count. On the reactant side, we have 1 carbon. On the product side, we have 1 carbon. On the reactant side, we have 4 hydrogens still, right? Even looking here, there's no coefficient. We have 4. On the product side, we now have 4 with the addition of our new coefficient. And finally, our chlorines, we have 8 chlorines now with the addition of our coefficient here. And on this side, we also have 8 on the product side. So we know these are the correct coefficients. So our correct answer will have the coefficients of 4 and 4, 1 before the Cl2 and 1 before the HCl on the product side. Let's see if any of our answer choices read as such. This first answer choice has no coefficient here. That checks out. It has a 4 here. That's where we want a 4. No coefficient here and a 4 here. This one looks correct, but of course we want to review all of our answer choices. No coefficient, that's correct, but it's missing a coefficient here as well. This one actually has no additional coefficients. This equation has not even been touched. This is incorrect. Our next answer option has a 2 in front of the first reactant, as well as another 2, a 2, and a 2. What I would ask you to do, I'm not going to run through it here, but I sometimes will check this and sort of balance it on my own very quickly to see if it's even balanced. The answer here is not balanced and is incorrect. Finally, we do the same thing here. Once again, not balanced, also incorrect. Our only correct answer is the first one here. We're going to select that. What you'll see is that sometimes these chemistry questions, the ones that require balancing, will take a little bit more time to work through. You need to factor that in when you are studying. This is why you study. This is why there are things you have to commit to memory, because there are some problems, there are some questions on your exam where you will have to work through it and spend the time, right? So if that took you 2 minutes to do, the remaining questions or other questions need to, on average, take you closer to 30 seconds. And that's just sort of like an important frame of reference to keep in mind as you're moving through your TEAS exam, as well as studying for it. All right, so question number 18 is a fill in the blank. It says the blank is the blood vessel that carries oxygen-depleted blood away from the heart. That's my kind of key word here is going to be away. I'm going to type my correct answer in the box here. This is something that you're, again, going to have to commit to memory. The pulmonary artery is the correct answer. Make sure you spelled it correctly, or if you want to get credit for it when you move through your answer choice. Even if you don't spell it correct, you know that you got it right. But again, for the exam purposes, you are going to want to spell everything correctly to get credit. All right, let's move on to the next answer. Question number 19 asks us, which of the following statements is true about viruses? Answer choice 1 is viruses will either have DNA and RNA as their genetic material, but not both. Next, viruses will have a mix of both DNA and RNA components. The next answer is all viruses only have RNA as their genetic material. And finally, all viruses only have DNA as their genetic material. What you will learn is that viruses can have either DNA or RNA as their genetic material, but they will not have both. Moving on to question 20. Which of the following structures is paired correctly with its function? Okay, so this is kind of a pairing where they've already paired it for us. The options are the colon and the formation of chyme, the stomach and absorption of nutrients, small intestine and the formation of feces, and mouth and mechanical digestion. The correct answer here is mouth and mechanical digestion. Question number 21. This question is sort of on levels of organization. It says the respiratory system is composed of organs that facilitate gas exchange between the blood and the external environment. Which of the following describes the group of organs that function during gas exchange? So you're looking for the term here that describes multiple organs working together. Tissue is incorrect. That is the material used to make up organs. Organelles, we know, are the pieces or the parts of individual cells. An organ is not multiple organs working together. Of course, an organ system, that even just common sense-wise sounds right. You wouldn't even have to really study for this answer, for this question. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. 22. This question asks, which of the following is the process by which gametes divide and produce half the number of chromosomes found in a somatic cell? We will learn in our biology courses that meiosis is the process by which gametes divide and produce half the number of chromosomes found in a body cell or a somatic cell. During meiosis, the cells divide twice instead of once. This results in the daughter cells, or the gametes, having half the number of chromosomes that you would find in a normal body cell that only undergoes one division during mitosis. The second division is necessary for gametes, since when an egg is fertilized, you need chromosomes from both the egg and the sperm cell to combine to form a zygote. Moving on to question 23. Which of the following correctly describes the difference between compact bone and spongy bone? Compact bone is composed of repeating units of osteons and is the strongest form of bone tissue. On the contrary, spongy bone is lighter than compact bone tissue. So I think this might be the right answer, but I'm going to double check, right? So this is something where, okay, I've studied the types of bone tissue, and I kind of have some knowledge coming into the exam, all right? So the first answer choice is spongy bone is lighter than compact bone, right? That is something that you kind of already know in your mind, but you're gonna keep this, you can kind of mark, okay, that one looks good. Let's look at the rest. Spongy bone has more osteons than compact bone. Well, my background knowledge already told me that compact bone actually has more osteons, right? So we can delete this one. Compact bone is trabeculate, has trabeculate that supports bone marrow. This doesn't really explain the difference between compact bone and spongy bone. And finally, compact bone is located more interior than spongy bone. Also incorrect, because spongy bone is not located on the exterior of compact bone, it's inside of it. Our correct answer is what we thought in the very beginning. It's answer choice A. Let's go ahead and select that. Oops. And we can also delete our annotations here. Which of the following correctly describes anatomical position? So this question is pretty straightforward. Anatomical position is just one of those things that you're going to need to know and be able to visualize in your head. You also need to be familiar with positional terms. So let's review them and see if that gives us a big clue as to which answer is correct. The best way I would describe anatomical position in my own words would be someone standing facing toward me with palms facing forward. That does help me to eliminate the answer choice saying that the palms are facing posteriorly, because we know the palms would be facing forward, right? Forward means anterior, so we can go ahead and probably eliminate these. As I kind of went through in my background, it would be someone standing, right? So someone upright. So this one looks like the most correct answer rather than prone. But we can go ahead and keep checking. Prone means lying face down. So that answer is also incorrect, right? So it's just kind of a process of going through and looking at the terms that you know and eliminating answer choices based on the knowledge that you do have. This answer has us upright, arms at sides, palms facing anteriorly. This sounds correct to me. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and this is the correct answer. I'm going to delete these annotations, select the correct answer here. Move on. Question 25 asks, which of the following is a substance that the kidneys remove from the blood during filtration? Do the kidneys remove blood cells, salts, carbon dioxide, or oxygen? This is one of the questions that you're going to, again, kind of have to commit to memory. You'll make flashcards, you can do matching, you can even label the parts of the kidney and explain the different functions. In any case, what you will come to is that the correct answer is salts. That's what kidneys remove. All right, we've made it halfway through the test. Let's take a break here and we'll come back and answer the remaining 25 questions. All right, folks, let's jump back in here with question 26. This question is an anatomy and physiology question. It's asking us about, this is just a term. Again, with a lot of these multiple choice questions, you're going to have to commit a lot of this to memory and be ready to answer them very quickly in the exam setting. So this question asks, which of the following does not describe the dermis? 1, the layer of skin that contains the network of capillaries necessary for thermoregulation. The layer of skin where cells containing the pigment melanin are found. A vascular layer of the skin, or the thickest layer of the skin. This question, as far as test taking strategies go, this question is asking you what does not describe the dermis. So it's looking for something that is not true. That will be the correct answer. The dermis is the thickest layer of the skin. I can go ahead and eliminate that one because that is a true statement. The next one is that the dermis is highly vascular, meaning it has a lot of blood vessels, as it has to supply oxygen and nutrients to the epidermis, which is avascular or lacking in blood vessels. So I can eliminate this one because this is also a true statement. And the next answer choice is the layer of skin where cells containing the pigment melanin are found. The layer of the skin cells where melanin is found is called the epidermis. So this statement is not true. This is our correct answer, but let me just go to the last one to double check. The dermis does contain the network of capillaries necessary for thermoregulation. So we know we can actually eliminate this one. The correct answer is answer choice 2, and we can go ahead and select it. Let's delete our annotations here, select the correct answer. All right, let's have a look at question 27. So this question says T lymphocytes mature and become functional in which of the following organs? The thymus, spleen, bone marrow, or lymph nodes? And the best way to study for this type of question is flashcards, and again, also labeling diagrams and explaining what the functions are of each part. The correct answer here is the thymus. We can move on to question 28. This question asks us, which of the following is not true about thermoregulation? So again, you already know I'm going to highlight that this is a question that's asking us to find a statement that is not true. So let's think about what we know about thermoregulation. First option is cutaneous vasoconstriction warms the body by restricting blood flow in the skin. Option 2 is cutaneous vasodilation cools the body by allowing heat to be released through skin. Option 3, sweating facilitates cutaneous vasodilation. And option 4, contraction of erector pili muscles facilitates vasodilation. Let's go ahead and start from the bottom. So this first one, I know that the contraction of erector pili muscle actually facilitates cutaneous vasoconstriction, not vasodilation. So I immediately think this might be my correct answer. But since it's not a true statement, I just want to make sure. We're going to continue. Sweating does facilitate cutaneous vasodilation. So this one I can eliminate because it is true. All right, the next one is cutaneous vasodilation cools the body by allowing heat to be released through the skin. This is a true statement. I can go ahead and eliminate this because, again, we're looking for what's not true. And finally, cutaneous vasoconstriction warms the body by restricting blood flow to the skin. That is true. I can eliminate it because it is a true statement. So our correct answer is that first one we looked at. We can go ahead and select it. Let me delete my annotations and select the correct answer here. And we can click next. All right, let's go ahead and look at question 29. This one is asking us which of the following is correct about muscle contraction, and we need to select all that applies. So we know there are likely more than one correct answer. Let's read the question. It says, which of the following is true about muscle contraction? What I'm going to do is go ahead and brainstorm everything that I know about what happens during muscle contraction. Since this is a select all that apply question, I know I'll likely need to select more than one correct answer, so we're going to read through all of them carefully. The first says actin and myosin filaments slide past each other. The next one is sarcomere shortens during contraction. Actin filaments shorten during contraction. Next, neurotransmitters stimulate muscle contraction. Next, myosin filaments shorten during contraction. And finally, muscle contraction requires ATP. All right. So I know that muscle contraction occurs when neurotransmitters are released in the neuromuscular junction and stimulate the beginning of contraction. So I know there's one correct answer right here. I can go ahead and tick this one because I know the role that neurotransmitters play. The process of contraction then involves the shortening of sarcomeres by the sliding of actin and myosin filaments past each other as the muscle contracts. This process also requires energy, so ATP is needed. There's 3 more correct answers. So it requires ATP. We know that the actin and myosin filaments slide past one another. And we also know that the sarcomeres have to shorten. All right, now let's review what's left. The 2 remaining answer choices talk about actin and myosin filaments shortening during contraction. This is untrue. These filaments do not shorten during this process. They move along one another to shorten the muscles. They themselves do not shorten. I feel confident in my answer and can go ahead and hit next. Now we're already off to question 30. All right, so question 30 asks, which of the following, again, we're looking for a not true statement about reproductive hormones. Okay, so let's go ahead and read this very carefully. We're looking for the thing that's not true. So the correct answer will actually be something that is wrong or untrue. I see that there are two hormones that are the focus of this question, right? So looking at the answer choices, it says LH, or the luteinizing hormone, stimulates ovulation and production of testosterone. The next says luteinizing hormone is produced by the posterior pituitary gland. The next says follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, is produced by the anterior pituitary gland. And the next says FSH stimulates maturation of sperm and ovum. All right. I can already tell that this question is focusing on these two hormones, right? So I need to think, what is my knowledge about these two hormones? First, both of these hormones are produced by the anterior pituitary gland. Since we're looking for the answer that's not true, I can eliminate this answer here that says FSH is produced by the anterior pituitary gland. I know that this is true. I also see that the answer incorrectly states that LH is produced by the posterior pituitary gland. All right, so I know that that is not true, meaning that this could be my correct answer, but let's just make sure. Let's focus on function. So FSH is involved in the maturation of sperm and the ovum, the egg. So I can go ahead and eliminate this answer because that, again, is true. And now let's look. LH's function is to stimulate ovulation and the production of testosterone. This answer choice correctly states this, and so this will not be the correct answer to my question. So our correct answer is option 2 here. I'm going to delete my annotations. Select option 2. All right, so let's look at question 31. This one is asking us to find the answer that is true. Which of the following comparisons between arteries and veins is true? Let's go ahead and read through our answer choices. 1, veins carry freshly oxygenated blood from tissue back to the heart, while arteries carry oxygen-depleted blood away from the heart. 2, veins have valves, arteries do not. 3, veins have thick muscular walls, while arteries have thin, more compliant walls. Or 4, veins have smaller diameters than arteries. Okay, let's go ahead and start from the bottom. Option 4 says veins have a smaller diameter than arteries. Due to the higher pressure in which arterial blood must flow, arteries have thicker walls and smaller diameters as compared to veins. So we know this answer choice is incorrect, as well as option choice 3. Option choice 2 says veins have valves and arteries do not. This is a correct statement. Due to the lower pressure in the venous system and the fact that most blood is trying to return back to the heart against the force of gravity, veins have valves that prevent the blood from moving backwards, while arteries do not. But let's go ahead and check our last answer choice here that says veins carry freshly oxygenated blood from tissue back to the heart, while arteries carry oxygen-depleted blood away from the heart. In fact, veins carry blood that is leaving the tissue after it has unloaded oxygen. Therefore, they carry the oxygen-depleted blood, along with metabolic waste, back towards the heart. The venous blood carries oxygen-deficient blood back to the heart. Arteries carry oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the tissues, where the oxygen can be delivered and used for cellular respiration. So this answer is also incorrect. All right, that leaves us with our one correct answer, which is answer choice 2 here. We can go ahead and delete our annotations, select that, and go next. Okay, question 32 says, melanin is the hormone that regulates sleep and wake rhythm. Which of the following endocrine glands is responsible for producing the melatonin? All right, so I'm looking for which one of these glands produces. So I'm looking for the function. The options are pineal, hypothalamus, pituitary, or adrenal. Adrenal glands produce the hormones cortisol and aldosterone. We're looking for melatonin. This one is wrong. Both the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands coordinate the function of the other endocrine glands by producing stimulatory and inhibitory hormones. So I can eliminate both of these. And finally, the pineal gland is what produces the melatonin hormone that regulates sleep and wake rhythm. Pineal is our correct answer, and we can go ahead and select that and move on to our next question. All right, so let's go ahead and look at question 33. It says, which of the following substances would not dissolve in water? Even not knowing much about chemistry, I know that NaCl is salt, and it absolutely does dissolve in water. So I can go ahead and eliminate that. And I know that my answer choice is one of the remaining 3 options here. The next thing that I would do to try and solve this question is to commit some chemical formulas to memory, and also possibly the ability to kind of work on your ability to map out or draw out the molecular structures. What you would see is that both option 1 here and option 3 here, option 4, have slight charges like water, and because of that, they will dissolve in water. Okay, so we can eliminate these 2, leaving us with our correct answer choice, which is C3H6. It's a nonpolar molecule, meaning that there's no charge on the atoms within it. And for this reason, there is no attraction to the atoms in the water molecules. And these substances, C3H6, will not dissolve in water. This is our correct answer. Again, we're looking for what will not dissolve in water. Let's go ahead and move on to question 34. Question 34 is a fill in the blank. It says, gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by blank, but impeded by blank. Okay, it's kind of a question about tidal volume. Gas exchange, so what I like to do is sometimes use the provided options and plug them into each blank. Gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by decreased respiratory rate, but impeded by increased tidal volume. Gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by increased tidal volume, but impeded by decreased membrane thickness. Gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by decreased membrane thickness, but impeded by increased alveolar surface area. Or last, gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by increased alveolar surface area, but impeded by increased membrane thickness. Okay, so the amount of gas exchange between blood and in the alveoli is dependent on the surface area and the difference in concentration of gas on either side and the thickness of the tissue. So the first part of the answer should be something that would result in an increase, while the second part of the answer should be something that would result in a decrease, right? So we have the words enhanced and we have impeded, right? Enhanced means kind of improved or increased. Impeded means decreased or suppressed in some way. All right, so let's look at our answer choices. All right, so the fourth answer choice says increased alveolar surface area and increased membrane thickness. So we can plug those in. Gas exchange between blood and alveoli would be enhanced by greater surface area and impeded by a greater or a thicker membrane. That makes a lot of common sense to me. And so I'm going to leave this as a possible answer. Gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by decreased membrane thickness. Okay, that sounds right. It sounds like if the membrane is thinner, then gas exchange could happen more easily. And impeded by increased surface area. No, that doesn't add up, because the more surface area, the more space there is for the gas to kind of transfer from one space to another. All right, the next one is gas exchange between the blood and alveoli would be enhanced by increased tidal volume, but impeded by decreased membrane thickness. I don't think so. I think it would be aided by decreased membrane thickness. So again, I can eliminate this one. And the last one says decreased respiratory rate would enhance gas exchange, but would be impeded by increased tidal volume. All right, so again, this one also doesn't really make a lot of even kind of common sense, so we can eliminate this one as well. That leaves us with our last answer as the only answer choice available to us. Luckily, it is also correct. We can select that and move on to our next question. Question 35 asks us, which of the following is true of insulin and glucagon? Please select all that apply. All right, so this is another one where I'm already thinking, okay, this question is about insulin and glucagon, and I'm going to probably be selecting more than one correct answer here. So let's start by thinking about everything we know about insulin and glucagon. First, I know that they're both hormones that regulate the levels of glucose in our blood. So I'm going to scan for that option as an answer, and if it's here, I can go ahead and pick it. Okay, do I see that here? Let's kind of hunt through. Regulate the level of glucose in the blood. Now, we have two options here at the beginning that say insulin and glucagon have opposite effects on blood calcium levels but work together to maintain homeostasis. The other one says insulin and glucagon have opposite effects on blood glucose but work together to maintain homeostasis. I know that they have opposite effects on blood glucose levels, not on calcium levels, so I can go ahead and select this second answer as the correct one. Insulin decreases the level of the blood's glucose during a fed state, and glucagon increases levels of glucose during a fasting state. So this answer, the first one is incorrect, but the second one is correct. Also, I know that insulin and glucagon are both secreted by the pancreas, not the pituitary gland. So I can eliminate the second to last answer and go ahead and select the last one. And I can click next. Question 36 says the majority of nutrient absorption occurs in the blank. I know that nutrient absorption happens in the digestive system. I also know that the folds in the lining along the small intestine, along with its length, allows ample time for nutrients to travel through the small intestine to allow maximum absorption. So the answer that I'm going to write in here is small intestine. And move on. Question 37 is a matching. It's asking to match the following structures to their function. So you get to use kind of a fun functionality that we have here on the website, where you can move these around and pop them where you think they go. All right. So the external sex organ of a male, we know that that is the penis. We know the copulatory organ of a female is the vagina. Implantation site of the zygote, we know that is a uterus. And the vas deferens is the sperm channel from the epididymis to the penis. All right, so you kind of start with what you know and then kind of gradually whittle away, and you can move on from this question pretty quickly. Question 38. Which of the following causes bone matrix resorption during bone growth and remodeling? So this is a function question. It's asking us which one of these things is in charge of or results in bone matrix resorption during growth and remodeling. Osteocytes are responsible for maintenance of calcified bone matrix, so we can eliminate this one. Osteons are the structural unit of compact bone, characterized by concentric bone layers surrounding a central canal. So this one is also incorrect. Osteoblasts are the cells responsible for bone matrix synthesis and calcification. This is also incorrect. Finally, osteoclasts are the resident macrophages of the bones, which are essential for bone matrix resorption during bone growth and remodeling. This is our correct answer. And again, this is something that will just have to be sort of committed to memory. I recommend flashcards, making sort of matching games for yourself so that this kind of becomes second nature to you. Question 39. Which of the following antigen-specific immune cells produce cytokines, which facilitate various immune reactions? Is it the macrophage cell, a helper T cell, a cytotoxic T cell, or a B cell? All right, so let's go through this. Starting from the bottom, B cells produce antibodies. So this answer is incorrect. The cytotoxic T cell directly attacks and destroys pathogens. So this answer is also incorrect. The helper T cells produce cytokines, which facilitate the actions of B cells and the cytotoxic T cell. So this one seems like the correct answer, but let's go ahead and check the last one. Macrophage cells are part of non-specific innate immune systems, which engulf and destroy bacteria and cellular debris during infection and injury. So this answer is also incorrect. That leaves us with our helper T cells as our correct answer. We can select that. Move on to our next question. Question 40 is asking us about the function of the epidermis. Again, we see a select all that apply, so we know there will likely be more than one correct answer. Which of the following is a function of the epidermis? 1, it protects underlying tissues from abrasions. 2, it functions as a major component of the innate immunity. 3, it protects underlying tissue from chemicals. 4, it stores fat. 5, it functions as a major component of the adaptive immune system. So I can already see this option is sort of opposed to this option. So it might be one or the other of these. And lastly, it contains many blood vessels that can constrict or dilate for thermoregulation. All right, so I know that the epidermis is the outermost layer of skin, and therefore it protects underlying tissues from abrasions, heat, microbes, and chemicals. So I can go ahead and select this answer, a couple answer choices off the top. It protects underlying tissues from abrasions. We also know it protects underlying tissue from chemicals. It functions as a major part of the innate immune system or the general immune system. That's this one. It does not adapt, right? Adaptive, in that it doesn't change or discriminate against what it allows in. It disallows everything from coming in. So that means I can also eliminate answer choice 5, that it is a major component of the adaptive immune system. This layer of skin does not contain blood vessels, so I also know the last answer choice is incorrect. And the lipid-containing cells are found in the subcutaneous layer. So I also know that the fat storage option is incorrect. I can go ahead and move on to my next question. All right. Question 41 is a fill in the blank. It says movement of molecules in a substance depends on blank energy. Is it X-ray energy, heat energy, UV energy, or gamma ray energy? The correct answer here is heat. All matter is made up of particles called atoms. These atoms are always in motion. They bump into each other, they vibrate back and forth, and heat is a form of energy that is created through the movement of those atoms and molecules. The more heat added to a substance, the more those atoms move around. And so we can confidently select answer choice 2 as our correct answer and move on to question 42. All right, a scientist collected the following set of data to examine the effects of exercise on patients' heart rates. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to just review this table for yourself, and then we'll talk about it in a moment. So my test-taking tip for this is to just have a quick look at the table provided. What I noted is that we have 3 patients, and we have their resting heart rates, and then we have a couple of 3 miles listed here, and an average of presumably their beats per minute of their heart for all 3 of those miles. I don't know if they ran those miles consecutively. I don't know anything more about what happened here. All I can tell is we have 3 different folks whose resting heart rate was taken at the beginning of the experiment, and then it appears their heart rates were taken after 1, 2, and 3 miles of running. All right, now I can read this paragraph here to understand the context. The patients were tasked with running 1 mile every day for 3 days. They were required to run the entire mile and were not allowed to walk. At the end of each mile, the scientists measured the heart rates of the patients. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn from this data? So now I understand that they ran mile 1 on day 1. On day 2, they ran mile 2. And on day 3, they ran mile 3. They're running 1 mile per day. They're not running 1 mile and then 2 miles and then 3 miles, right? So now let's see what information can be drawn from this data. So I'm going to delete some of my annotations here so that I can scroll up. The patients became fitter with each mile run. The patients ran mile 3 faster than mile 1. The patients that ran the mile faster had higher heart rates, or running increased the heart rates of the patients. Okay? Well, let's start at the bottom. Regarding option 1, or the bottom option here, running increased heart rates of the patients, right? So we can see here's all of our resting heart rates, and here's our heart rates after running. In each one of those cases, these folks have higher heart rates across each mile, right? So when they run, they have a higher heart rate than when they are at rest. Each one of these first column heart rates is their at rest heart rate. So we know this is true. It's a very general observation, but it is accurate. The next option here says the patients that ran the mile faster had higher heart rates. Well, do I have any information about the time that it took any one of these folks to run their mile? No. So I cannot draw this conclusion based on this data, okay? The next option is the patients ran mile 3 faster than mile 1. Again, I have no time data. There's no data here that tells me anything about how long it took these folks to run their mile. So I cannot say that this conclusion is something I can draw from the data provided. Again, I can eliminate this one. The patients became fitter with each mile run is the last option. Again, do I have data on their fitness level? There is no information here that would give me an insight into who was more fit than the other. And so again, this is a conclusion that needs to be drawn from this data, right? And we're talking about this data, not data that you have in your head, not thoughts that you have or assumptions you make about people who run more often, right? So we can eliminate this answer choice, leaving us with this more basic, but nevertheless accurate observation based on the data we have. So we can, I'm going to go ahead and delete all my annotations here. I'm going to select the last answer. All right, let's look at question 43. Question 43 is asking us to answer what statement is true about hydrogen bonds. So that means that each of these answer choices, there will be only one that is accurate, and that's going to be our correct answer. 1, they're considered strong attractive forces. 2, they don't affect the properties of water in any way. 3, they form between a partial positively charged region on one molecule and a partial negatively charged region on another molecule. Or 3, they result from the attraction between ions that have no charge. What we know is that hydrogen bonding, and what you'll learn in our chemistry course, is that hydrogen bonding occurs between molecules when at least one contains a hydrogen atom and both molecules have a small electric charge because the molecule is polar. There's going to be a slight positive charge and a slight negative charge, which creates a weak bond, but nevertheless, there is a weak attractive force between the slight negative and the slight positive. So, the correct answer choices are our third one from the top. If you want kind of an explanation of why the other answers are incorrect, move through this quiz on your own, and the non-answers will be explained in full detail. Let's move on to question 44. Question 44 asks, which of the following is the most plausible sequence of events? 1, is it born into a musical family, grows up around music, starts learning guitar, plays concert? That sounds pretty reasonable to me. It's my first answer choice, so I'm going to put a little circle here to tell myself that one seems possible, but I want to move through all of them before moving on. Extensive car use, air pollution, that makes sense. Less people with asthma, less healthcare expenses. That doesn't really add up. If we have extensive car use and air pollution, I would think we would have more, not less people with asthma. And then that would result in more, not less healthcare expenses. So I can eliminate answer choice 2. 3, walk in the woods, stung by a bee, given morphine, early death. All right, again, the first one kind of makes sense with the second one. You walk in the woods, you might come upon a beehive and get stung by a bee. Given morphine, that seems extreme for a bee sting. Additionally, early death. Is an early death associated with being given morphine for bee stings? It doesn't really add up. I can eliminate this answer. Finally, poaching more rhinos, okay? More export rhino horn goods. That makes sense. More goods with lower economic value, okay? Economy boost, right? Boost means increase. Lower economic value means decrease. That doesn't seem, lower economic value would not correlate with more exports, right? More exports to me means you would have a higher economic value, and then that would lead to an economy boost, right? So again, this answer choice doesn't make a lot of common sense. We're left with our first one that we like to begin with as the correct answer. We're going to select that one and move on. All right, let's look at question 45. Which of the following would be the approximate mass of a car? 180 kilograms, 18 kilograms, 1,800 kilograms, or 180,000 kilograms? So it's good to have just a relative idea of the scale of various objects. The average mass of a human is around 60 kilograms. The average mass of a car is around 1,800. The average mass of a laptop is about 2.5 kilograms. And if having those in your mind help you create some ways to estimate correct and incorrect answers for questions like question 45. We can go ahead and select answer choice 3. That is our correct answer, and we can move on. Question 46. The same single replacement reaction is run on 2 different beakers. These beakers are labeled as beaker A and beaker B. They are heated to 75 and 100 degrees Celsius, respectively. If the reactions are run for 15 minutes each, which of the following results would you expect to observe? Beaker B produces more product than beaker A. No products are produced in either beaker. The 2 beakers produce the same amount of product. Or beaker A produces more product than beaker B. You know, this is one where you could draw something out for yourself. You have one beaker, and you have the second beaker, and we'll say this one is B, and we'll say this one is A, and we'll say A was heated to 75 degrees Celsius, and beaker B was heated to 100 degrees Celsius. All right? Just so that you can keep straight which one was warmer than the other. The correct answer here is going to be that beaker B produces more product than beaker A, and here is why. As the temperature of a reaction increases, the reaction rate will increase as well. Remember that heat makes atoms move around more, creates more of a reaction. This is due to the increased number of collisions that occur between those molecules during the reaction. Since beaker B is at a higher temperature, it should produce more product than beaker A, since the reaction times available are the same, right? So the reaction time, we know each one was given 15 minutes. If you allowed beaker A to keep going for another 5 or 10 minutes later, perhaps they would have the same amount of product, but since they are both stopped at that 15-minute mark, we would expect beaker B to have more product. All right, and so that's our correct answer. We're going to go ahead and delete my annotations from this, select our correct answer, and move on. Question 47 is a fill in the blank. It says enzymes are biological catalysts that blank are necessary to convert substrate into products, bind to the products, use up the substrate molecules in the reaction, or increase the rate of any given reaction. What you're going to learn in our chemistry course is that enzymes are used regularly to increase the rate of a given chemical reaction. Question 48 asks, why are control groups used in experiments? Is it to increase the amount of data collected, to help scientists quickly perform experiments, to minimize the effect of variables, or to ensure the accuracy of measurements? When you go through the scientific design and methodology portion of our biology course, you'll see that it's so important to have control groups because it minimizes the effect of variables. You're able to draw clearer conclusions about what caused a particular outcome in an experiment. So that's our correct answer, and we can move on to question 49. Go ahead and review the data in this table and then choose the statement that draws the best conclusion. So again, I'll give you a few moments to review this table on your own, and then I'll come back and we can discuss the correct answer and how I got there. All right, so like I explained for a prior question that had a table regarding the runners, what I like to do is take a look at the table first before I even look at the answer choices and figure out what I think is happening here. What I have is a whole bunch of students, right? We have 5 students. We have the time that they spent sleeping the night before. The night before what? Oh, they have test scores, so presumably the night before a test. Here are all of their respective scores. And then, oh, here are some more students. This is an interesting format for a table, right? So I'm learning something here. We have some more students, 5 more. We have the time they spent sleeping at night, the night before, and we also have their test scores. Okay. So looking at this, my guess is that this experiment wanted to do some amount of analysis on how the amount of time spent sleeping the night before a test affects the student's test score. So now I'm going to take a look at my answer choices and see which one sort of fits. I think the best time-saving one would be to look at the answer choices and figure out which one fits. I think you could also spend a moment or two in the exam taking a look here to see if you notice any correlations yourself, right? So who slept the most? Antonio, right? Antonio slept 10 hours and got a 92. All right. Who slept the least? That looks like Scott, 6.2 hours, and he got a 67. All right. So I can see 67 is pretty far below a 92. Maybe the more you sleep, the better your test score, right? Let me check a couple more just to see how that conclusion sits with me. This person here slept for 6.9 hours. This is the next lowest. She got a 70. That's Lily. And let's have another look. We have the next highest is someone who slept for 9.4 hours. They got a 92. I'm sorry, a 91. All right. So, and it does sort of continue to track. The next down would be 9 hours over here. That person got a 89. Someone who got 8.3 hours got an 87. Someone with 8.2 hours got an 86. Someone with 8 hours also got an 86. So maybe between 8 hours and 8.2 doesn't make too much of a difference. And then finally, our folks down here, Janae and Jamelia, slept for 7.5 hours and got an 80, 7.3 hours, and got a 79. So what I'm seeing is as the number of hours goes down, so too does the test score. All right. Let me remove my annotations so that we can kind of more clearly see our answer choice options. There is no correlation between sleep and test score. Well, as we just went through, we saw there is sort of a correlation. We can eliminate that one. The amount of time spent sleeping is the cause of what test score was received. This one is tempting. I'm going to leave it, and we're going to discuss that one in a moment. Hours spent sleeping and test score and score on the test correlate negatively with one another. As you sleep more, your test score goes up. That seems like two positive responses, so that would be a positive correlation, not a negative one. And that's not our answer. The next option is hours spent sleeping and score on the test correlate to one another. So it doesn't specify is it positive or negative, but it does say that there is a correlation between sleep and test score. I like this answer the best, this last answer. Here's why. Answer choice 2 says definitively the amount of time spent sleeping is the cause, meaning the only one, of what test score was received. Meaning, if you slept for 8 hours, you got an 86. But if you slept for 8.5 hours, you got an 89. And that's not necessarily true. It's not that prescriptive. We see that some folks slept for different amounts of time, but got the same test score. So that undermines this particular conclusion, and we can remove that one. So the last answer choice, while again, similar to the other table that we looked at, it's a very general observation, a very general conclusion that can be drawn. Nevertheless, it is the correct answer for this question. We know that there is some correlation between test and sleep, but we also know perhaps there was other data that was not collected here. Maybe these folks ate different things. Maybe they ate different amounts of things. Maybe their beds have different comfort levels. Maybe there was additional noise in the background. Maybe some of them had a class before they took the test. There are so many other variables we could throw in here and think about so that we can't say with absolute conviction that the time spent sleeping is the cause of what particular test score someone received. That goes a little bit too far. We can go ahead and commit, I think, pretty fully that hours spent sleeping and test score have some correlation to one another, and it might deserve some additional review. Let's go ahead and go to the next question. Question 50 says, dissolved oxygen, or DO, is an important indicator of water quality and oxygen levels that are too high or too low that can cause harm to aquatic ecosystems. A biologist noticed that fish were dying in a local lake and was concerned that the DO levels were too low to support aquatic life due to extremely high temperatures that summer. To measure the DO levels, she brought back several lake water samples to her laboratory to measure the DO concentration as a function of temperature. To do this, she heated several samples of lake water to various temperatures and then measured the DO concentration in each sample. Some samples were kept at the outdoors temperature. Which of the following is the independent variable, right? And so what you'll learn in our scientific design course is that an independent variable is the variable that is controlled during an experiment to see how it influences the dependent variable. So here, our scientist was trying to draw a correlation. She was trying to see how the temperature impacted the DO concentration, right? That's what this sentence here tells us. Wants to measure the DO concentration as a function of temperature. So she's going to change the temperature. She's going to adjust the temperature as we see in her experimental design. She's going to heat the temperatures, the lake water samples to various different temperatures. She's controlling that. That is the independent variable. So that she can measure those DO levels and see, well, how does that temperature impact the dissolved oxygen level? So our independent variable here is going to be temperature. We can select that, feel confident in our answer, and move on. All right, folks, that's our full practice test, the free TEAS 7 practice test. We can finish our quiz. You hit the finish button right here, and you can review all of the correct answers. You can review the incorrect answers. Use that to help you build some study tools like flashcards, diagrams for labeling, matching games for yourself.